Hello. If you're watching this video and thinking it looks like she's in bed, you might be onto something. Don't judge. Okay, so this is from Hild, and it's quite a long email, but I'm going to read all of it. So Hild writes, I'm wondering if you can speak to whether or not mental illnesses really exist, and if eating disorders are a mental illness. Personally, I mean that mental pain is real, and certainly people deserve and need help, but I feel like naming something a mental illness causes more issues than it creates solutions. I feel like the idea of an objective existence, for example, eating disorders and mental illnesses, creates stigma, puts ideas into both sufferers and treatment providers' heads, and it prevents so-called professionals from listening to people's lived experience about how their eating problems started. The reason I'm saying this is that I have myself experienced that people don't believe my story of how I developed anorexia as a 15-year-old. For example, i.e. I simply stumbled into it through what was meant to be a very short-term diet. I didn't have trauma or body issues, but falling into anorexia, I developed both. Some more background. I am volunteering for an eating disorder organisation. I accidentally stumbled into an argument with some of those employed by the organisation. The argument started with me suggesting that some people stumble into anorexia, and while that some people, of course, may develop anorexia as a response to trauma, there are those who don't come from a particularly disadvantageous background in terms of poor upbringing, sexual abuse, drug abuse, and the family bullying, etc. I said that I myself developed anorexia as a 15-year-old and had never heard of anorexia before, so I was not planning on getting thin. I just wanted to lose 3 kilos because my friends dieted and I wanted to see what would happen if I did so too. And in fact, I remember thinking, if they can diet, I can diet too. I was not having any issues with my body before I started dieting. My time was mostly spent riding horses and carrying huge backpacks while hiking in Norwegian nature. If my body ever occupied my thoughts, it was because I was tired, hungry, or in pain. But actually it was good health, so things usually took care of themselves. However, I began cutting down on food, and I started losing control. Of course, I felt great because I was good at what I was doing. Make a long story short, it wasn't until after I developed anorexia that I began weighing myself and fretting over food and eating. It was not because I developed an eating disorder that I started to feel fat and wanted to skip eating. It was not before I developed an eating disorder that I started to feel fat and wanted to skip eating. And it was not until I gained weight back by accident, I watched a documentary about anorexia that came to understanding, I guess that's what I had too. My point is not that mental pain isn't real or that it is biological. My point is we don't have a more diverse understanding of these problems of food and eating developed until we start listening to the broad spectrum of stories people are telling. Just listening to those stories we believe won't serve anyone. Those who feel their stories are discredited won't speak up then, and their stories won't be heard, which is deeply problematic because treatment providers may continue asking them to find out what started it and heal their trauma. Thus, the important help, which is to help the person starting to eat enough, may be postponed. Just wondering what your thoughts are regarding this. Well, I think that if you've read my book or any of my blog posts, you know that exactly really what my thoughts are on that, being somebody that developed anorexia, having never had a trauma, and I didn't have body dysmorphia. I was quite happy with my body before I had anorexia. Similar sort of thing as you held, and I just actually horse riding as well. And so I do think that it's not the problem necessarily calling anorexia a mental illness, and I actually think anorexia is both a physical and mental illness, actually, as most illnesses are, to be quite honest. I think that all mental illnesses have some physical attributes to them, and all physical illnesses have some mental attributes to them as well. You know, so if we think of something like cancer, then that's definitely, I think, thought of as a physical illness, but it also has, of course, it has elements that it affects somebody's mental state. You imagine being diagnosed with cancer. Like, that would definitely affect one's mental state. So I think that we fall into traps when we think of something as just a mental illness or just a physical illness, when really all illnesses affect both the mental and physical body, because guess what? The mental and the physical body are connected. I know that might be a little bit out there for some people. Your mental body and your physical body are connected, and they affect each other. Anyway, but I think what the real problem is that humans are just, it's part of, I think, one of the things that makes humans so brilliantly intelligent is that our brains have this knack of categorizing information, and our brains do that to make the world a simpler place for us. And so the problem is that creates stigma and stereotypes, and we can't say it's all bad, because if you think about it, having things, stereotypes and stuff like that, it is helpful for our brains to categorize stuff. That's what our brains do. And so thank you, brain, but also it's a pain in the ass sometimes, and it can lead to real problems, just like you're talking about here. I do think we absolutely have to listen to individual stories. And I think that, education is really important here. And another problem here is that, say, your general practitioner, doctor, they're not educated in eating disorders. And that's not just me saying, like, go get educated. It's actually that they're not really educated in eating disorders. Most doctors go through something like half a day of education on eating disorders throughout their entire 6, 7, however long it is training, so 7-year training. And so it's not like I'm just saying, like, you've got to go and do your research. It's actually true that they're not really educated in that, and they've got so much other stuff to get educated in. We can't expect everybody to be a specialist, can we? And so I think that really what would be helpful is if we just left things for people to get a bit more specialised in, and not just kind of like try and educate somebody on eating disorders in half an hour and expect them to be efficient. And the only way that you can educate somebody that quickly on such a big topic is by basically giving them pretty stereotypical information. So it's difficult. I think that the other problem with when we stereotype stuff is that we take a popular at the time theory, which is, I'm going to say that a popular theory however many years ago was eating disorders are caused by trauma. That's a popular theory. It's not true across the board. And it's actually not true, because trauma doesn't cause eating disorders. It can be a contributing factor to an eating disorder. Or what causes eating disorders is prolonged energy deficit and genetics. So it's a problem with that word cause. Trauma absolutely can be a contributing factor to an eating disorder, but contributing factors are different from causes. And I think that it may be true that many people who have eating disorders also have trauma in their life. But many people who do not have eating disorders also have trauma in their life. And I actually get a lot of emails from people who have eating disorders and also ride horses. So I could actually conclude that horses cause eating disorders. Anyway, horses don't cause eating disorders. I was being flippant, just in case anybody got confused there. I could also probably conclude that cats cause eating disorders, because I've noticed that a lot of people who have eating disorders also like cats. Just putting it out there. Anyway, I think I've completely missed the point. The point being that, yes, we absolutely have to share stories, and we have to get in doing so we can get a much broader perspective on things. Because if we really share stories and listen to the people that say, hi, I've got an eating disorder, didn't get abused as a child, can you listen? If we actually listen to those people, then yeah, I think that it would fast become, okay, not everybody who has an eating disorder has trauma. That's not entirely true. And really what it comes back down to is that we have to look at biology as well. We have to look at biology. Oh my God, it's not a coincidence that all of us that develop anorexia kind of do the same things and have the same thoughts, more or less. There has to be a biological component. It's not just a big old coincidence. And I know this stuff is hard. Change is hard. Change is so hard. Yeah. Humans are resistant to change, especially when we have a belief system, especially when something's like, aha, yes, we got it. We know what causes eating disorders. It's trauma. Yes, done, solved. And that turns into a belief system. And it's really hard to change, because if you think about changing it, you have to realize, like, oh, we haven't solved it. Shit. And that's hard, isn't it? Anyway, okay, so I hope that answers your question, Hild. I think it's a question that I think many of us definitely totally agree with, and I'm sorry that you had that experience of an eating disorder organisation, but like I said, change is hard, and especially when we've got a belief system to change, that's really difficult.